Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into one of the absolute most fascinating paradigm shifts in modern thought. We are unpacking Carl Jung's radical rereading of Western religious doctrine. Now, to be clear, we aren't treating this as literal history or theology today. Instead, we're looking at it exactly the way Jung did, as this epic, inherited map of the human mind. We are literally talking about the ultimate psychological hero's journey. So, to really grasp why this matters, we've got to start with a deeply uncomfortable question. What happens when a religious myth completely loses its power over a society? Well, Jung noticed a massive shift happening in the modern world. When those old religious containers break down, that profound human need for meaning, it doesn't just vanish, it turns inward. In fact, Jung boldly stated that a lot of what we call neurosis is honestly just the suffering of a soul that hasn't found its meaning yet. Okay, let's dive into this. The modern psychotherapist has basically inherited the ultimate questions of meaning, questions that used to be handled entirely by priests and philosophers. I mean, imagine going to a therapist hoping for a little stress relief, and you walk out with a full-blown existential quest instead of a prescription. But Jung realized that true healing is way more than just managing a few symptoms. It requires the patient to face their total self, and yeah, that includes their capacity for evil. And the therapist? They have to know their own dark side too, or they're just going to get tangled up in the patient's mess.
To understand Jung's map, we're going to walk through 5 key stages today. 1. The modern meaning crisis. 2. Symbols as psychological maps. 3. The missing fourth, the shadow. 4. Rituals of inner transformation. And finally, 5. Individuation, the integrated self.
All right, part 1, the modern meaning crisis. As we step into this first stage, we really have to recognize the sheer vulnerability of the modern mind. When it loses those protective traditional structures, it is left completely exposed. Moving on to part 2, symbols as psychological maps. This brings us to Jung's incredible insight into what symbols actually are. They aren't just dusty rulebooks, they are sophisticated psychological armor.
Take the word dogma, for example. We usually hear that and think of rigid control, right? Basically the ultimate intellectual buzzkill. But Jung saw it completely differently. For him, dogma is a crucial psychological shield. It acts as a container for this intense, powerful psychic material that would otherwise completely overwhelm us. By externalizing these massive unconscious forces into rituals and doctrines, dogma acts like a pressure valve. It makes the terrifying depths of the mind bearable and gives us a safe, structured space to actually process them.
Jung actually traced a really distinct movement in how we handle these forces. It starts empirically with the dream. That's the raw, wild energy of the unconscious mind. Then it moves to dogma, where concepts like the Trinity organize that psychic conflict into a symbolic form. From there, we absolutely have to confront sacrifice, dealing with the problem of evil and our own shadow. And finally, the whole thing culminates in individuation, which is the emergence of the true whole self. You can actually trace this progression clearly. It's like moving from a wild, isolated symptom of a dream, steadily through the institutional containment of dogma, engaging in the active tension of sacrifice, and finally arriving at a radiant, integrated human figure. And hey, it's super important to remember that we are charting the journey of the mind here. We're mapping out the pure psychology of how we experience these incredibly potent symbols. Which brings us to part 3, the missing fourth, the shadow. Every great hero's journey has a profound crisis, and Jung found a massive blind spot hidden right inside our highest image of order. Let's break down the Christian triad. It is a beautifully harmonious 3-part system. You've got the Father, representing law, order, and origin. You have the Son, representing the conscious ego and human identity, and you have the Holy Ghost, the living link of spirit. Psychologically, this represents a steady process of conscious maturation. It's a system of pure light, pure goodness, and supreme spiritual elevation. But, mathematically and psychologically speaking, a system of pure light leaves something very dangerous lurking in the dark. So, the crucial point is this. Jung realized that 3 is simply not enough for psychic wholeness. A 3-part system of pure goodness mathematically excludes the difficult opposite. And you know what happens? Whatever human consciousness aggressively excludes, the unconscious eventually manifests as a threat. Jung called this the problem of the fourth. When a psychological system demands pure spirit and absolute goodness, that fourth element is actively suppressed. It's pushed completely out of the picture.
But it definitely doesn't disappear. It comes roaring back as the shadow. Throughout Western history, this excluded fourth often shows up as the devil, the earth, the body, or matter itself, basically whatever the dominant system rejects. Jung argued that you literally cannot be whole until you bravely confront exactly what you've thrown into the dark.
Part 4. Rituals of Inner Transformation. So how does the human mind attempt to heal this fracture and actually integrate these opposing forces? Well, it stages a ritual. Jung viewed the Catholic Mass as an absolute masterclass in this process. It's a staged, symbolic dramatization of the psyche being broken down and rebuilt. It starts with an offering, but psychologically, offering an object really means surrendering a piece of your own ego. Then comes the mysterious moment of transformation. That's followed by the breaking of the bread, representing the necessary breaking or death of the narrow, isolated ego. And finally, we get the reunion, the psychological rebirth into a wider, much more integrated self. It's amazing how elements of the earth, like ordinary bread and wine, are elevated to become purely spiritual. The masculine and feminine, the gift and the giver, they all converge. For Jung, this climactic transformation represents a deeply necessary psychic event. It takes a terrifying mystery, the death of the ego and its profound renewal, and gives it a safe, contained form that our intellect alone just couldn't possibly process. And that leads us to part 5, individuation, the integrated self. This is the ultimate destination of this incredibly difficult inner journey, the true goal of our psychological development.
Jung called this individuation. It's the courageous, intentional act of integrating that missing fourth element. It means facing your shadow head-on, pulling back all the blame and projection you've been casting out into the world, and learning to actually hold the tension of your own inner opposites. It's an incredibly challenging shift from being a fragile, divided ego to stepping firmly into the center of your psyche as a radiant, whole self. Now, what's really interesting about this whole process is how it reads almost like a psychological staircase. We start at the top with the Father, our identification with law and origin. We step down to the Son, the realization of our conscious ego. We engage with the Spirit, our inner guide. But then, to reach true maturity, we have to descend into step 4, the shadow. We absolutely must confront the chaos, the exiled parts of ourselves. Because it's only by passing through that dark shadow work that we can arrive at the final step, the integrated self, the true source of illumination and perfect balance. Jung found that when the mind actually achieves this state, it naturally produces symbols of wholeness, like the quaternity and the cross. The 4-part quaternity replaces that old, unintegrated triad. And the cross itself? It's a profound sign of division, horizontal and vertical, light and dark, spirit and matter, but it's all held together in a sacred tension at a single central point. The psyche doesn't find peace by running away from conflict. It moves squarely through the conflict to find reconciliation right at the center. Jung's exploration of Western religion leaves us with a pretty profound realization. These ancient myths aren't just floating out there in the clouds, they are the living, breathing architecture of your own mind. And the journey to wholeness? It's not about achieving pure, unblemished goodness. It is about total, unvarnished honesty with yourself. So I want to leave you with this to consider. If true psychological wholeness requires integrating your difficult opposites, your excluded fourth, what part of yourself are you still leaving in the dark?